So, what progress are we making in eliminating our rivals, the view from the hazards?
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I haven't gone out onto the warpath yet, but I'm going to plug this. Viewers can expect to see a website deployed probably before this episode goes out. So, check out sfignorance.github.io.
That's so exciting.
Witness the power of this fully armed and operational website.
Yeah. Does View from the Hazards have a...
They don't have a website, no.
They don't
just
have a
YouTube
website,
channel.
see?
Yeah. They don't even have
There you
an Anchor FM. They just have YouTube.
And do you know what? If I get ours on YouTube, then they'll be in trouble.
Hello and welcome to Speaking from Ignorance. I'm Daniel, a PhD student studying astrophysics.
I am Jacque, a charity person doer and a social mobility advocate.
Hi guys, I'm Sid. I'm also an astrophysics PhD student.
Hi, I'm Carl von Clausewitz, author of On War, the 19th century theory book on the art of military warfare. Oh, no, fooled you. Once again, it's me using my broad range of accents and real effort, as well as my chameleoid acting skill to disguise myself. Yes, it's me, Henry Holmes, raconteur and after-dinner speaker, according to my CV.
Hi, I'm Max. I'm a machine learning engineer.
Damn, that sounds so much cooler than everyone
Oh,
else.
that's cooler than anything we're doing.
We normally start off with this informal question. I think this one's Daniel's.
Yes. It's, what is something that you love that other people hate?
Maybe you should start off, Max.
Oh, a fantastic question. This is going to be an incredibly controversial opinion. This brings
I thought you were about to say the Fantastic Four.
That's the whole point of the question.
Absolutely.
Generate that controversy.
So it's going to be my favorite meal, which has just been with me from childhood. It's going to be pasta with cheese and ketchup, and you've got to boil the pasta and then fry it. That's the key part.
Then fry it.
Everybody,
You boy.
I was with
That
you.
is a controversial
I was with
opinion.
you, and then you said fry the pasta.
I mean, like, at what point are you frying it? Is it before or after ketchup? This makes no sense.
Of course, before. Come on. Like, it's an obvious 4-stage process. You boil the pasta, fry it, then you add the cheese, red Leicester, of course, and then ketchup.
A red Leicester, good choice of cheese.
Well,
You bring
Speaking
it
as
back.
a cheese connoisseur, it's the only one to go for. But yeah, it's a comfort meal, and I do have it way too frequently, and I just can never ever get away from it. It's like a guilty pleasure, which always just feeds back with amazing results.
Do you ever have the people you live with going, "Why are you frying pasta?"
Oh, absolutely, all the time.
No, I think isn't frying pasta a thing? It's not a common thing, but I think it is a thing people do.
And it should be a thing people do more. This is my real opinion right now,
Well, yeah, I think I don't know though. Apologies to all our Italian viewers. But
I did have an Italian housemate.
you had an Italian housemate. How did they react to
She was truly outraged, and her parents came in one time as well. And there was a fierce,
She was so
a fierce
outraged she brought
debate.
it
Like, we brought out the wine and like strong alcohol and just chatted about it the whole evening. It was a fantastic conversation. So, if you ever need a conversation
was
starter,
she most outraged? Where you took the pasta out and began to fry it, or when you added the ketchup?
it was the ketchup. I think Italians, it's always the ketchup, right? They
Yeah,
need
you have to
real
use
sauce.
proper tomatoes, don't you? Yeah.
The real gusto. It's not quite the same.
What's the texture like?
The texture, it's never something I've really thought about. It's. Have you ever fried pasta?
No, I haven't.
Okay. We'll start.
I know I defended you earlier by saying people do it, but I'm not one of those people.
Well, it's just a bit harder, isn't it? I like the crunch. I think that's what's missing from when you boil it.
Have you tried not cooking the pasta at all?
You want that carcinogenic crunch. Like,
You mean no? I totally get that. It's like a nice pasta bake, and like the top layer is definitely the best layer. So if you could make that for like the entire pasta dish, sure.
Although I think the top layer of a pasta bake is so good because the rest of the pasta bake is like normal pasta.
It's just like a nice crunchy
I think
surprise.
it's like that gradient. Well, I wouldn't class it a surprise unless it's the first time you're having a pasta. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I suppose it's like when you go to a pub and you order some fries, and then you get that like random curly fry. It's just that.
Yeah, you're right. It
random
is
drop of
surprise.
Niceness.
Yeah, it's the I don't know what type of pasta I'm gonna get, crunchy or not crunchy.
I mean, I know that's objectively nice.
That honestly
It just
sounds like a
horrible.
Japanese game show.
I love Japanese game shows so much. They're just so weird. Just, yeah.
I just think any game shows I've come across in Asia are pretty weird. Like, so for context, I used to live in Brunei, and I was roped into a radio competition once there because I knew that the radio DJ Izan, and she just saw me in the shopping mall when I was on the way to do a concert. I was going to sing, and she just went, "Oh, Henry, come over here." And I went, I need to go and warm up. She went, "Oh, how long do you have?" I went, "Well, I've got an hour." She went, "Oh, it won't take very long." And I was taken down to this basement to do a sushi eating competition. But all the sushi had wasabi in it, unless you were lucky, where it didn't have wasabi in it, and then you were able to progress. But it was really strong wasabi, and I am bad with strong flavors and spices and things like that. And they hadn't told me this was the aim of the competition. So I just went, and I don't know what the benefit was because it was on the radio.
Did you win?
No, I was knocked out straight away.
Anybody
I
else
like
got any?
bad films. I mean,
Such as?
Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, God, no.
Nobody likes that.
No.
I don't know because they're always
Like
so
La La
bad.
Land,
It's not
yeah,
even
yeah.
like memorable. Like, I
Yeah,
can't
so
even-
bad it couldn't even win Best Picture.
Sure, man. Jeez. No. It's just like I like to just like chill out by putting on like a trash sci-fi film or like just some trash film. Like it doesn't even matter what genre it is.
What's a trash sci-fi film like 2012 or?
Oh yeah, that's pretty trash.
That's
That is pretty
awful
trash.
film.
That's the one with the neutrinos, right? At the start.
Oh yeah, it is. The neutrinos have mutated.
Yeah, which is true. That does happen. I guess we don't call it mutation, but at least it's technically correct, right, guys? So that's
Yeah, 2012 is 100% accurate.
Even if the terminology at the start wasn't an issue, the cinematography certainly is. But
I like Nicolas Cage films where
Oh, okay.
you have no idea like how crazy the sky's gonna get. You know.
have you ever seen his remake of The Wicker Man? Have you ever seen his remake of The Wicker Man? Okay, so the original Wicker Man with Christopher Lee and all that is an epic cult horror film. Nicolas Cage's remake involves a point where he's got a mask on his face full of bad CGBs, and he's going, "Oh, the bees! The bees!" And you're going, "What the is this film?"
There's also the scene where he's in a bear costume and just runs up to a woman and punches her in the face. I mean, I'm sure there's some context to that scene, but out of context, it's just so
it's
funny.
sort of in keeping with the original that they're remaking, in that they're a bunch of pagans on an island and they dress up in a series of outlandish costumes at the summer solstice. So presumably he's in disguise, but I don't want to spoil it actually for people who haven't seen The Wicker Man. I'd thoroughly recommend watching it though.
The Nicolas Cage version, right?
No. No, never watched that version. So bad films. That's fair
I'm trying to
enough.
think. I do have something, but it's kind of niche, and that thing is like
Yeah, mine's kind of niche as well.
linear algebra. This part.
I was not expecting that.
No, I'll make it more general, but just like the math that's involved behind doing a lot of things involved. Well, you said machine learning engineer before, Max, but that sort of maths is really interesting to me, even though you don't actually have to know any of it to, at the moment, go away and just do stuff. I really like delving in and actually figuring out how things are working.
No, I completely agree. No, you really triggered something inside me there. It's a deep love of linear algebra that lies within.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it gets a bad rap.
Which is, it gets a bad rap, mainly because it's not taught very well.
It's not taught well, and actually I think you've said something that's really important, is that it's actually a bit of an issue that so many people are using machine learning without having that fundamental understanding of what it is that's actually happening. So, but we'll talk about that later in the
Exactly. We got time.
I mean, that sounds quite concerning. Like people using it.
Well, it's also the beautiful part of languages like Python, which let people write really high-level wrappers around this code. So someone can literally just go and easily create a model without understanding, or without having to understand is a better way of putting it, what the actual maths is, because somebody else has done all the hard work for you.
Exactly. I mean, that's both good and bad, right? It depends on what your research question is and what you're trying to achieve. So in a way, that's great that more people are able to do this thing, and in the future, it'll just be a part of like any software engineer's portfolio. But
It's sort of the difference of buying a desk from IKEA and going into the forest, training to be a carpenter, and making a desk yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
IKEA does work to a certain extent until it all breaks.
Other furniture stores are available.
But other furniture stores don't have meatballs, so...
No, that's true.
Is that true?
Yes.
No other furniture stores have meatballs.
I don't know if no other furniture stores have meatballs, but it's kind of what I associate IKEA with. Swedish meatballs.
Yeah, it's true. It's the only reason I go.
Yeah, same. A friend of mine took a date to IKEA.
Oh, so romantic.
Which I found hilarious, but I don't know if his date found it hilarious, though.
It's a power move.
Yeah, it is. We're not going to a restaurant, we're going to IKEA. Because then I can muck around in the kitchens pretending I live there and things like that. Which is always fun.
It's a very unusual date.
It is unusual. I think my controversial... I like bad poetry.
Oh, okay.
I like bad poetry.
I'm trying to get into poetry again.
But it's so like an example of probably my favourite bad poet is William McGonagall, who's generally considered the worst published poet in the English language. Who's, his profession was being a poet in the Victorian era. He was published all the time in papers, and he is unintentionally hilarious because he will make. Because it's like he hasn't got the memo that poetry doesn't have to rhyme. So he'll be writing about some really serious topic, and then he'll just force a really ham-fisted rhyme in there. He's talking about a family who are burned to death. Is like the family and the man in the chair both were carbonized. The victims looked upon the thing. They were surprised. Like,
Oh my god.
It's that level of...
This is exactly the kind of poetry
And
I want to make.
it is my stated intention to have people read William McGonagall poems at my funeral. And I want them to have never read these poems before, so that they're really struggling to meet the tone, because I want my funeral to be funny, basically. But his most famous poem is called The Great Tay Bridge Disaster, which is about a big railway disaster where the Tay Bridge collapsed and plunged a train into the loch. But he massively exaggerates the casualty figures to get a rhyme. He goes, 90 lives have been taken away on the last Sabbath day of 1879, which will be remembered for a very long time. And you go, it wasn't 90 lives, it was about 18 people. He's worth checking out. Like, even his poem on the sort of the benefits of sobriety is amazingly hilarious.
Part of me wants to believe that he knew exactly what he was doing.
Did not.
But it really sounds like
his folios are called something like Poetic Gems, More Poetic Gems, the third book of Poetic Gems.
You think for a poet he'd have a more larger vocabulary?
Having said that, I like bad poetry. I do also like reasonably good poetry as well. Like, if you don't like poetry but you want to get into poetry, I would recommend Philip Larkin as your place to start, because he is the poet for people who don't appreciate poetry, in that he's quite accessible, but also he's quite sardonic and sacrilegious about things. It's like he doesn't care as he's writing his poems. There's one about a church he writes where he describes the building as an accoutred frowsty barn, which I quite like as a turn of phrase. Oh, by the way, if people are wondering why I can just quote poems, it's because you have to learn them during actor training.
No, because you're a man of culture.
I'm a man of culture.
Why can Holmes quote poems? It's literally his job.
Yes.
It's part of his job.
No, it is a big part of my job, actually, because it's amazing how often you're required to sort of do poetry readings and things as part of being an actor.
Part of like after dinner speeches and stuff.
Yes, where you go, out spake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate.
When all the nobles have arrived at your dining hall.
Yes. Yeah, any members of the aristocracy who want to book
Surely
me,
you have your own minstrel, your court minstrel to do this for you? Or?
I sacked him because I enjoy doing it. Anyway, I had a jongleur. I'm more traditional Saxon aristocracy. Just for context, Max, there's a running gag on this podcast that I'm fabulously wealthy and live in a podcast and have a vast staff of people.
Right, I see.
He lives in a castle, not a podcast.
Did I say I live in a podcast?
Holmes only exists in this podcast.
Don't we all only exist in this podcast, though?
Yeah, true.
To the outside viewer?
I mean, given the state of the acting industry at the moment, yes.
So today on Speaking from Ignorance, we have our special guest speaker, Mr. Max Anson. But yeah, Max is our expert machine learning person doer. Do you wanna take it from here, Max?
No, I'll just let you keep going.
I mean, I have no idea what you...
I like seeing the fear in our guests' eyes when we say they're experts.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying.
It's great.
No pressure, right? Yeah, okay. So I can briefly say what it is that I do exactly. So I'm a machine learning engineer, as Jacque has said, working for a health technology startup company based in London. And we focus on remote monitoring of various respiratory diseases, especially for vulnerable patients, such as elderly in care homes and children under the age of 5. So they're the two most vulnerable categories for various problems such as pneumonia. Especially right now, given the current situation with the elderly, that's we're really trying to help out with that kind of stuff. And the way that everything works is that we have a mobile application, and it connects to off-the-shelf medical devices like a digital stethoscope and a pulse oximeter. If you don't know what that is, that's the finger thing. That really helps a lot of people. Yes, it helped me too when I started. And we
the
connect
finger
to those...
thing.
The finger thing, yes. So we connect to those via Bluetooth, and then we gather various vital sign information from those, such as respiratory rate and oxygen saturation, and various important factors. And then we will be able to feed all of these signals to a doctor on a web portal, or on a web portal at the moment. And then they will be able to look into all those signals and stratify and triage which patients are more vulnerable, which patients are less vulnerable at the moment, and they can make more informed decisions without ever having to actually go into the care homes and see the patients, or getting the patients to go to the hospital. And right now, that's really important. You don't want the elderly going to hospital. It's very, very high risk, and also vice versa. You don't want external people coming into care homes. So yeah, and the where AI comes in is it's extracting all these various vital signs, for example. So it's a three-stage process. The first stage is there's a lot of noise in a lot of these medical signals. So for example, it's one thing taking a stethoscope measurement in a hospital where it's all really clinically nice. All your control variables are just like perfect. Everything's really, really good. As soon as you're doing it in a care home where there's grandfather clocks in these signals that the digital stethoscope picks up, we've heard that, or there's like children crying when we're doing the child side of our device. All of this kind of stuff and talking, that's really, really noisy, and it makes it really difficult to extract the signal from the noise. So what we first do is we're using artificial intelligence to identify the signal in that noise, and where we can't, we ask them to retake the signal altogether and try and identify what the type of noise is so they can train themselves to understand how they're going to create a better signal. Then the second stage is we then extract all of that information once we've figured out, okay, is this signal clean enough to actually extract anything meaningful from it? And the third stage will be to combine all of that vital sign information as well as questionnaire data that we take from the patient into a final diagnosis or something that a doctor can use and understand. So that's the process, and hopefully kind of makes sense.
Nice. That was pretty clear.
Fantastic.
I like how professional it sounds when you say we use artificial intelligence too.
Oh, so it sounds good, right? You feel all high and mighty. People love those buzzwords.
I'm going to use my classic tactic of asking our guests to predict the future. So, I mean, despite the coronavirus, and imagine it had never happened, do you think this is the direction that medicine is moving in anyway?
Definitely. And I think even if it wasn't a direction, it's essential for it to move in this way. I think a lot of people agree that there's a lot of things in medicine that are currently pretty broken and very slow. And inefficient as well, and automating a lot of these processes has a lot of benefits. For example, to get rid of manual errors. Of course, AI will create some errors itself, and that's a whole different issue altogether. There's going to be a really interesting philosophical debate in the future, I believe. But in theory, you should understand why it made the decisions that it did if you have explainable artificial intelligence, which is another different thing. That's also going to be a philosophical point. That aside. So it's like, I think, where was I? What was I saying?
Despite the philosophical implications, you were sort of moving in the direction of talking about how this could potentially alleviate some of the strain on existing medical services. Yeah,
it will alleviate the strain. It will also get rid of manual errors. So a lot of and the doctors will just have a lot more time to do the job that they're supposed to do, rather than logging all of the different health information for the patients, keeping track of it. And that's just a lot of unnecessary effort at the moment. So I really do believe this is the way forward.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great point. I wonder how many hours a GP uses just like doing like routine like measurements and stuff, right? So if you could just have a room where it's like self-checkout, the data just goes into like a server somewhere. I wonder how much pressure you could actually alleviate from the NHS.
Yeah. In theory, you should be saving more lives, and there should be less mistakes. So it's all good stuff.
That's awesome.
In theory.
In theory. Wait. Whoa. Hang on. What's that mean?
No, not the saving lives. I just mean like artificial intelligence.
No, I'm gonna run with the in theory bit here, because this sort of automation is sort of like part of the process of phasing out those kinds of jobs as well, though, because you're hiring people on that business side. The GP is normally the one who does it, but you also have like nurses, and if you start removing those sorts of responsibilities from those people, then you might start taking those jobs out of the market. However, of course, we're always like, the job market is always changing. Like 10 years ago, being a YouTuber wasn't a real job, and now it is. So we can't really predict what jobs will be available. It's not like there's 100 jobs in the market, and now they're gone forever because robots have taken them. It's constantly evolving. But I do think it's something to keep in mind. Like the automation side is the other ramifications, because obviously, like for us, we're not thinking about that. We're just trying to do our jobs to the best of our ability. But it's going to be interesting in society when we start trusting AI more to do that sort of stuff.
I mean, yeah, I agree totally, and it's definitely something we should take into account. But in my eyes, I see AI more as an enabler for somebody to be using it. We're a long way off from just full automation to the point where everyone's jobs are at stake.
Yeah. Where we're only doing creative jobs, for example. I don't think we're anywhere near that sort of stage.
Well, I was rather worried the other day, talking of AI and creative jobs, in that Japanese scientists had made an artificial actor, and I went, okay. I'm just qualified, guys. I'm just qualified.
The world is stacked against you.
One more year and you would have been all right. But yeah, I mean, there's actually quite an interesting film made by an AI called Sunspring, which I'd recommend checking out. It's a short film. It's 9 minutes. And this really showcases just how not very good artificial intelligence is at the moment.
Is it made as in like rendered and everything by the AI, or is it just written by the AI?
Oh, so this is fun. Yeah, it's written by the AI, but it's with real actors. I think it's like an established director.
Because I've seen these AI movie scripts before, and they're fantastic.
It's absolutely incredible. Most of the phrases are "I don't know what you're talking about," which really again goes to show about how AI doesn't really know what it's doing yet. But yeah, it's really interesting, and I bet it must have been really fun for the actors to try and like take that on board.
Oh yeah, I bet that's
try and take it seriously.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Oh god.
We think soap scripts are bad, but I mean, a script written by an AI would be fantastically bad.
So yeah, all that general AI stuff is very, very far off. What AI is excelling at is when, for example, there's a form of artificial intelligence called supervised learning, where you have loads and loads of data and somebody has painstakingly labeled a lot of that data. It will be able to find the rules. That's the difference, right, between what machine learning is, what I do, and what a lot of people tried before machine learning came about, is that beforehand, you'd have data and you'd have rules and you'd get an output. And machine learning would be you have data and the output and you'd learn the rules. And that's kind of the fundamental difference there. And that's super great, like when you have the data and you have the outputs, but it's so often the case, like you have to have somebody label all of that stuff, and that's really expensive time-wise. So it's still a long way off even in terms of that. But when you do have that, that is where it's really, really good, and you can really see the benefits. So that's the need.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing we're seeing with ImageNet, but a lot like Google Images, for example.
Sorry, what's ImageNet?
It's a neural network that basically can classify a lot of different types of images.
So like cat, dog, cat, dog, cat, dog.
So ImageNet is a massive, massive data set, which a lot of neural networks have been trained on and are trying to outperform against each other. I think it's millions.
Oh, sorry, yeah. ImageNet is the data set, my bad. What am I thinking of? I think it starts with a V. Anyway,
VGGN, you're probably... Or VGG?
Yeah, that one, yeah.
VGG 16.
VGG 19?
Yeah, that's
yeah, VGG Net 19, something like that. Essentially, it's the one that you probably saw videos of where it's like cat, car, traffic light, person, pedestrian, bicycle, all in like the same image, and all these boxes moving around, because it's using like this huge data set of labeled images, like Max mentioned.
Exactly.
And it's been trained on this, and then it's combining all of these things into the image. It should be noted, though, it doesn't know what pedestrian means.
It just knows that
it
thing
just knows
is
that this looks like this label called pedestrian, but it doesn't have any notion of what a pedestrian is.
Yeah.
But isn't that the difference between machine intelligence and human intelligence, essentially, at the moment?
And I would have said that we're stuck there if it wasn't for something I saw from OpenAI GPT-3 a week ago, which is basically, man, this thing is scary. I think you can check it out online if you search OpenAI GPT-3, and I forget what it stands for. But yeah, there's an example where they have of like code completion, and literally, when we normally talk about code completion, this is computer code, is you just have it like autocomplete. That's all we want. It's like, quickly autocomplete my stuff because I'm lazy. I don't want to type out the whole thing. This code completion, you write it a comment and it writes the code.
Oh yes, you were talking about this the
It
other
legitimately
day.
seems to understand a bit of the semantics, and because it's, they're publishing on this and they're trying to make money from it as well, they're not going to tell you how to do it, so they just show you the really cool examples, and I'm like, Yeah, but this probably means that they've worked on it since then, and they've already implemented a lot of the really cool stuff that I was thinking about. And I'm like, oh, how does this work? Because that's exactly the area, like you mentioned, it's really AI is really nascent. But that's exactly the part of AI where we were all like, nah, that's a long way off.
Well, yeah,
it's like
but I mean, again, like you shouldn't take it with a bit of a pinch of salt at the moment.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
probably showcasing the really good examples. There's a really
yeah,
great
yeah.
website.
And obviously that example that I just gave isn't going to be then doing something else.
Because how well
without-
does it understand syntax? Does it need correct grammar, for example? Because, a lot of people don't
Yeah,
write
it does.
with
It,
correct syntax and
so
grammar.
basically, in the example, he wrote something that a human would understand implicitly means something slightly different than what's explicitly written, but he had to rewrite it explicitly, intentionally, to show the difference of that. But there is still that.
So you can't
human element
imply
that we
things yet. You have to explicitly...
Yet. Yeah, well, because it's just been trained on, all these comments. Like, this is what a sentence
To be honest,
is like.
I don't want stuff to know
it's not
when I'm
thinking,
implying
right?
things.
I think, like, using artificial intelligence give this false notion that this thing is thinking and predicting and doing all these things, where actually it's just in this very high-dimensional space trying to minimize some equation.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a common issue, is the anthropomorphizing. I've probably said that totally wrong, but you know the word I mean. Making an AI human, where a lot of people will start to believe that it's like the predictions that it's making, and if it's confident that it really is that thing, and that's totally not true. It's emulating what we've trained on it, and obviously that comes back to the whole thing that AI is inherently very biased quite often because we've trained it in a certain way, because we've implemented our own biases into it quite often as well. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to watch out for. But yeah, I'd really recommend a website called AIweirdness.com. This is a really funny
AI weirdness.
Yeah, it's a really great showcase of like somebody's taking all of these incredible advances and just like showing where it really goes wrong. So for example, like there's so OpenAI also did a question answering system, and for some questions and answers which are really common, it will be fantastic at answering the question that you have. But as soon as it's like, I think there was a great example of she asks, why is the sky blue? And then the answer is, because blue is the only color the sun trusts. And I just don't think that's right.
Because it's the only colour the sun trusts. That's the kind of answer you give to an inquisitive 3-year-old when you've run out of patience.
Yeah, it'd be really good for a question answer for a 3-year-old, right? And there's also lots of issues like, it's just, again, it's coming back to the whole point of it only really knows the stuff that it's been taught on, plus a little bit more when it's around that area. But people, for example, have been able to apply a little bit of noise to an image. And for example, let's say it's an image of a sign, and it totally predicts it's a sign. It's like, yep, that's a sign. I got you. And then you add a tiny bit of noise that's completely imperceptible to a human. But the AI completely changes everything. And they did this with loads and loads of images of totally different things. They applied basically the same noise, and every single time it's like, no, that's an ostrich now. And
Yeah.
it's clearly not. It's still a sign.
And it's like very confident as well
Yeah.
that it is an ostrich, even though as a human you're like, that's a sign.
Yeah, so that's a common thing as well. And so there's a lot of interesting things that are still being studied here. So again, main takeaway, AI is nascent. Don't fear it.
It's a tool. It's just a tool that people struggle to
Yeah,
understand.
it's just another tool that we have, but it seems like so much more,
Yeah,
mainly because of the media.
yeah, exactly.
And because we need to get funding somewhere.
Well, it's also been, it's been the subject of dystopian sci-fi since the late 1800s, Isaac Asimov and all that stuff.
I was just thinking about that noise, that noise issue, right? Because does that mean self-driving cars can be thwarted by snow?
Yeah, so there's going to be a new form of vandalism where really, really clever hooligans will apply maybe onto a stop sign. They'll add an image of noise to it, and it will totally misidentify it. I think we're going to be a way off from that, but it's still a genuine fear. So yeah, it's quite an interesting problem. But then to do that, you also have to
just snowy stickers.
But to do that, you really have to understand the problems and the pitfalls in the artificial intelligence you're being put against. and that's pretty tough. So you have to apply the correct gradient. These things are still relatively rare, and they've just found them through a lot of trial and error. But so yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about the vandalism aspect, and it's an active area of research.
It was like a proof of concept. It's because I think there was a surge in, because neural networks, there's sort of what we're talking about now instead of just machine learning, is specifically like neural networks have been around for a long time, like since the 80s, and then there've been like a few surges. My supervisor likes to mention this every time I bring him. He's like, "Oh, hang on," because I've seen this surge, and I'm like, "Yeah, but now we have computers that are actually fast." But yeah, we're sort of in like another surge, and it's another thing where people are like, "Oh, hang on, they're not. We can still beat them. Like, watch."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so people are a bit worried now that will we go into another AI winter, it's called. So there have been 2 AI summers in the past. So I think the first one was in, correct me if I'm wrong, like 1950s or 60s maybe. That's when people really started to be like, okay, this can happen, this is a thing. And we have some potential computational power, very limited, but we can do something with it. Then they realized we still can't do very much. There's lots of theory there, but we just don't have the software or the hardware or anything required.
Yeah, there was a problem of generalization, right? Where
Yeah,
it was like super cool, but then it can't even solve these basic problems, so why should we use it?
yeah, exactly. So it could solve like chess, but it couldn't solve much else. And then I think the second AI summer was in the 90s, 80s, 90s. And that's when expert systems came about. And that's another form of artificial intelligence that people often forget about, is just artificial intelligence, right, is just automating a process that humans can do well. Automating intellectual processes. And even Excel, to be honest, is a form of artificial intelligence. You're automating a process.
Or like self-checkout.
Yeah, and anything like that.
Most things like in day-to-day life.
Most things are, yeah. So under that very broad definition. And so, yeah, then there was the form of expert systems in the 90s where that was like the very classic thing of, okay, you get an expert, he codes in some rules, you feed it some data, and you'll get an output. And then again, neural networks were picking up a little bit, but they just didn't have the computational power. And then again, it fell down into this winter, like they lost funding. Expert systems were good to a level, but they couldn't get past like human intelligence, right? Because it was coded fully by humans. We didn't code anything else in that says, okay, you learn for yourself what's going on here. And then came the computers, then came like GPUs, TPUs, massive computational advances. That's still going on with Moore's law. Like, it's just an exponential increase in all of this stuff. And so people do now believe, I'm one of the believers, that this is here to stay, because it's the first time that the theory is now enabled. Like, we can actually apply everything we want to. And if we can't, we know that in a couple of years we will, because somebody will build something that will allow that computational power to take place.
No, I totally agree. I think it's here to stay. I think the field is going to just get bigger. However, I think we aren't going to see the huge leaps, because I think it's also a good thing, because we've reached that sort of part of machine learning and AI where we're not making the huge strides anymore. For example, there's no like Newton's laws of machine learning being built every day.
Yeah, right.
Or like the theory of relativity. It's, hey, we know what works, and now we're making small adjustments to it. So it's like it's evolved into a full discipline, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what will probably happen now is just democratizing AI quite a bit. So getting more accessibility, so more people will be able to use it in their jobs. And it's just, yeah, as I was saying, like, it's just another tool that we can use. Really cool stuff. And yeah, we've had like a massive acceleration, I think, since 2014. It was just crazy these past 5-6 years. And it might slow down now a little bit, but it's going to spread out, and it's here to stay, because it's just a fundamental toolbox to add to any software engineer stuff.
But yeah, you know what, Max, it's really awesome to have you on board, because obviously you're working on a really practical use of machine learning in a really, I don't know, timely time. So how many people are currently using your technology? Obviously, it's very early stages, right?
Yeah, it is still early stages. We have been deployed into multiple care homes. I'd need to ask my sales guy to know exactly how many, but it's getting there. We're spreading more and more. I think it's in the tens at the moment of care homes, which is really nice. And also,
Still really significant though.
That's hundreds of people then, surely.
yeah, it's quite a lot of people. Yeah, we're getting.
I mean, to be honest, if it's in the tens, it might even be getting towards 1,000.
Yeah, that's true. There are more than 10 people per care home, right? No, my math.
But yeah, so we have that, and then we have a large project, which is where this all actually started. A large project in India, where we focus particularly in slums in India. We try and deploy it to help a lot of children under the age of 5. So this whole thing actually started from our CEO, Elena. She worked at the World Health Organization for some time before doing a PhD in Oxford on machine learning applied to the medical field. And while there, she just saw just how massive a problem pneumonia is in children under the age of 5, and how treatable it is as well. Like, it's a totally treatable disease if it's identified early. And there was just a lot of discussion there that we could definitely do something here. And that's why she did the PhD and formed the company. And we still have that base going on at the moment. So we really like, I think we had like a project, I think it's 10,000 kids in India are using the device. But unfortunately, that's had to take a break because of coronavirus. There's been total lockdown, and the trained community health workers that we had out there don't have access to the kids' homes anymore, and rightly so, obviously. But yeah, so we're having a break on that at the moment. But they're the two main areas: is kids in India and the elderly in care homes in the UK.
With the current as sort of crisis, have you been sort of approached by the government as part of their strategy for coping with the current pandemic?
Yes, yeah. In fact, we have. I believe we're even on the government website at the moment as well. So that was pretty cool.
Are you allowed to reveal the company?
Our company, yes, it's called Febris. Febris, Febris. I think it's after some sort of either Roman or Greek mythological god or goddess to do with health.
So Max, what is it like being a machine learning engineer? What's your day-to-day like?
Yeah, good question. There's no like exact answer to day-to-day. It's a lot of deep work, I'd say. It's kind of like a PhD, I'd imagine, where I'm reading a lot of research papers. I'm just trying to keep up to date with the newest techniques, and then applying them to various problems that we've got going on at the moment. So, for example, applying them to the denoising or the symptom extraction, all that different kind of stuff. So a lot of it is just going through the machine learning framework, which is obtain data, clean the data, very important step, which is probably the thing that most machine learners spend most time doing, besides labeling data, which is the bane of most machine learning engineers' existence, unless you're paying somebody else to do it. So yeah, then assembling the data in the right format, trying some neural network architectures, or whatever machine learning method you are doing. There's loads and loads of different ways, and sometimes neural networks are not the best. They're less explainable, so we try lots of different architectures, weigh them up against each other, display results. So it's basically just for performing scientific experiments in the data world, and then trying to maximize results, pretty much.
Yeah, I think it is quite similar to the PhD. It's like, I think it's also because you're working at a startup though, because that sort of relationship that you probably have. I've never worked at a startup, so I don't know. But it sounds similar to what I'm experiencing on a day-to-day basis as well. Like, it feels like you really matter, like you're contributing to this thing. Because there's less people, it's smaller, so your contribution is much more valued.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got a big boy question.
Ooh.
Here we go.
If you're ready for it, Max. But do you have an overarching driving force within your field? Like, is there a message that you keep that really drives you every day? For example, I'm going to name drop Lex Friedman again. But he says that he wants to build robots better than everyone. He wants a robot in every home. Like, that's his message. And, he has this big quest. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, I do, actually. What I really like about startups is that you have a mission altogether, and startups survive by having that mission and projecting that mission forward. It's about it's about why you're doing something rather than what you're doing. It's really, really important, and it's also what people get interested in and get sold on as well, both in terms of company and in terms of customers. And for me, yeah, it's really about making healthcare accessible to all people, no matter about like their background, and just democratizing healthcare as much as possible, and making that as accurate and efficient as possible at the same time. And that's where the AI comes in. I have a strong belief that AI is very powerful to make things efficient and accurate if you do it in the right way. So that's probably the mission I'd like to convey.
Nice. That's really inspiring. I'm going to announce the question as well as the speaker for next week. But before that, I'd like to tell you guys how you can find us. We're on Anchor FM, Spotify, and YouTube mainly. Well, also on Twitter. The handle is @FromIgnorance. You can email us at speaking.ignorance@gmail.com. And newly, we have a website at sfignorance.github.io. It's probably going to change once we get an actual domain. At the moment, it's just hosted off GitHub pages. But yeah, check us out there.
And Facebook.
And Facebook, sorry. Yeah, that's the other big thing. We're now on Facebook. So, the question for next week is there a subject you think you'd enjoy, but don't because of a teacher?
Oh, that's a good question.
Is that just like an episode where we're like pointing out asshole teachers, you know?
No. Totally not that. And our speaker for next week is our friend James, who those of us who went to Exeter, went to university with. He's now doing a PhD at Oxford in... I can't say it. It's a difficult word for me to say, but I'll just let him explain it. Because on the podcast list, it says he's going to be talking about James stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But he also uses machine learning neural networks, but applied to genetics.
At some point in the next week, can he tell me what he does as a PhD so I can do some basic research?
Genomics, that's it. Genomics. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Is that with a
I don't
G?
know, that's a hard word for me to say.
Genomics.
That.
Genomics. I don't know what that is.
Yes.
We'll find out next week.
We'll find out next week. Thanks again, Max.
Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.
That was really, really enjoyable.
Thanks for listening, everybody. See you next week.